Shannon, what clearly sticks out is that line about a suspected shooter firing multiple shots from an elevated position outside of the rally venue, which would synchronize with some of the things we've been picking up on social media about a man dead on top of a roof outside of the rally.
Yeah, and witnesses who were there on the scene have talked with our...
And then this, I don't know, this came to me, so I just put it in there. I see the Capitol, and I see, first I see a person at a desk, which I'm assuming after the fact now is like a president or the president. And then the Capitol, and I get like overthrow, cancel Constitution, demands, tear down, disable, New World Order. So I don't know if Elon's trying to become the president.
Nyiam is an audiovisual artist and certified HRVG remote viewing instructor who has gained recognition for his expertise in multiple remote viewing methodologies and his ability to blend artistic skills with psychic techniques. His work with the Future Forecasting Group and various remote viewing projects has showcased his unique approach to exploring unexplained mysteries and predicting future events. In this conversation, he talks with me about consciousness and the importance of the artistic visualization aspect of utilizing remote viewing to see the future in the event stream. He shares a couple of his most recent sessions covering the first Trump assassination and seeing Elon Musk in the White House almost 2 years before it happened. Sit back and enjoy this provocative and insightful conversation. Well, welcome to the Nexus, Nyiam. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
You have been getting quite the reputation over the last year or so with some specific events that you were involved in with your craft and skill of remote viewing. And some of the most amazing stuff that I think anybody who's trying to use any divination tools or techniques, in fact, I've noticed a lot of the psychics are starting to talk about, well, I'm doing tarot and psychic and remote viewing. They're all tagging remote viewing onto their little bag of divination tools. But you have been just delivering some amazing work. And before we get into some of those things that I think are going to be fascinating to explore, how did you get into remote viewing? Did you have to grow your hair in order to get into remote viewing?
I get that question sometimes, actually. Yeah, well, it started for me more than maybe 15 years ago now. I started getting interested in just alternative information in general, whether it would be conspiracy theories or consciousness research. I just stopped watching TV and started, more reading and looking into alternative spaces for information. And that got me into different forms of meditation. I found Robert Monroe's books, Journeys Out of Body. And I found that whole idea of an out-of-body experience was very interesting to me at the time. And that led to finding out about Stargate, reading about Stargate online. So it went from, I was never really interested in remote viewing per se, or even really any psychic type of work. I was just interested in the consciousness aspect and what is reality, what is consciousness. And when I read about the Stargate remote viewing program that the government was doing, and that it was pretty down to earth in terms of, I was reading that these guys were just sitting at tables and doing this thing, whereas the out of body stuff kind of felt more mysterious, like, how do you track that? How do you know what's going on? Whereas the government program seemed like, okay, there's manuals for this and these guys are apparently doing this. So I decided to look and, started to read some of those documents and found some manuals that were around at the time and started practicing it for myself just to see if it was real. I just wanted to see, what is that experience like? Is it legitimate? Is this something, way out there, or is this something based in reality? And it wasn't too long after doing it that I started to realize, like, yeah, there's really something here. And that led me on a whole other journey, just really practicing and refining that skill. At the time, there wasn't many ways to see remote viewing. So there was a lot of books, and I'd read everything I could find. But it was hard to really make a connection or relate. There wasn't anyone to really speak to, or, YouTube didn't really have many videos of anyone doing remote viewing or anything like that. So it was kind of like I was just doing it on my own and dabbling in it. And it wasn't until probably Farsight, some of that early Farsight stuff with Dick and Daz and Courtney, I saw something like that. I saw one of those videos at a point, and that's when it kind of clicked to another level for me, because I saw someone doing it in real time, which was completely different than reading about it, right? It's like, I like to say, that's like reading about playing a sport and then seeing someone playing a sport, right? There's like two different things. It's like you're imagining it one way, and then you see it, and it's like, okay, that's how this works. And so that really inspired me and kind of elevated my game to the point where I was like, okay, I got to be able to do this as good as these guys. I got, now that I know what it looks like, I got to be able to do it like this. And
well, to your point about knowing what it looks like, wasn't the advent of going to the whiteboard and filming that really, to me, kind of the breakthrough for a lot of people to actually experience what you saw, is watching Dick and Daz and Edward do these whiteboard live sessions, and you're going, you can see the process, you can watch what's going on, and they're consciously engaged while exoterically, maybe, non-locally expanding their consciousness to some target ID.
Yeah. I remember watching a lot of Edward Reardon's videos. He has these videos where he's doing like, an hour and a half full session. And it's like, as someone who knows what the remote viewing process is like having done it myself, and then seeing him do it, who was someone who's more experienced, and yeah, you could see you see the input, you see how he's working it out, you see how the data gets recorded, and it just made the whole thing make more sense. It made it much more real. And I started doing the same thing. I started saying, okay, I'm gonna record myself. I'm gonna start to record my own sessions here, because I just felt like no one knows what's going on here. That's how I felt at the time. And it's like,
and a lot of them still don't, right?
Yeah. So that was kind of the beginning of, just not really to even show it to anyone. It was just, I'm going to record it, and whoever's interested in this will find it. That was kind of my idea at the time.
Now, how did you get involved with Dick and Daz and the Future Forecasting Group now?
Yeah, so my YouTube was, for a remote viewing channel, it started, a lot of people were getting interested in it. I was on the Discord. There's a remote viewing Discord and Reddit, and I would post things on there. And Courtney Brown actually saw some of my work and emailed me, and he asked me to do some work for him at that time. He gave me some lessons in SRV, and we were talking, and I did a few targets for him. And he was, he knows Dick, he knew Daz, and I had been sending Dick Algar emails. Like, I found his email online, and I would just send him emails and ask him questions. Not really getting too much responses at that time. But once I started talking to Courtney, he kind of tied the knot there. He said, oh, Dick, here, here's this guy Nyiam. He's wants to learn more about remote viewing, and that kind of is where that relationship started. And Dick started giving me mentorship over a number of years. I was learning from him, and I just kept putting out work. I started doing a monthly world events type thing just on my own. Like, I was not working for Future Forecasting Group yet. I was just doing it on my YouTube. But I would always send Dick my work. I'd be like, hey, look what happened this month. Look what happened this month. And they would send me targets every once in a while. They would send me like a crypto thing or some other targets on the side. And I guess it just got to the point where the company grew to the point that they were looking for, to add someone new. And I kind of was just there on his mind, I guess, with the work with the work I was providing. So it kind of just worked out like that.
So I want to get into some of the most recent work you did, because that's where, the real meat and potatoes are. I think of, reality is having the best way to, in my opinion, to gauge your grasp of reality is to cast a prediction and see how it turns out, right? And if it works out or you get close, varying degrees, you know that you can look at what you're doing. And this, to me, ties back to the whole RV process, because there's a number of delineations. You get scientific, controlled, extended, right? I'd like to talk a little bit more about that as well. But before we get into that, as you were getting into remote viewing, as you were exploring this, your artistic side of art and music, was that your main focus of your energy, and then this remote viewing thing kind of dropped in?
Yeah, it was. At the time, I had a studio where I would record and do my artwork, and that's where I spent, a great deal of my time. I was, essentially living out of that space at the time. And that kind of had me a little bit isolated from society in a way. Like, I wouldn't really go out that much, or, I wasn't really doing all the things that people my age were doing at that time. I was very much in my own little room, working on my art, working on music. And then once the remote viewing thing took a hold of me, I was, I could say I was pretty obsessed. Like, I would wake up at 7 a.m. and do a session, like record a session for first thing in the morning, get up and record a session. Got every book I could possibly find. Like, I was consuming so many books at the time. Anything online that I could find about remote viewing, I was reading it and taking it in. And it did derail, I guess, my other creative endeavors. Everything else I was doing kind of came to a bit of a pause as I dove into, engulf myself in the remote viewing mindset and process. But it was so rewarding. So, and I almost didn't notice at the time. It wasn't about getting paid. It wasn't about any of that. It was just purely a passion project. It was just, I knew I had to do this for whatever reason. I was just following my heart in that way. So it is kind of, I would say coincidental, but I don't really believe in them in that kind of way. But yeah, the way things have worked out, it's kind of like something from the future was kind of pulling me in that direction. Yeah.
Could you say that the artistic expressions and explorations that you were doing with both imagery and sound and music, maybe were in some way kind of preparatory for what you're doing, how remote viewing has become so important to you? The visuals and the sounds are very important in the whole protocol of gathering data, right?
Yeah. Well, when I really first started doing remote viewing, one of the things that I noticed that was very familiar was when you're writing a song, and like, okay, writing lyrics, it's like what I would do is, you write a line, and then you need to have the next line connect to it in some way, whether, let's say it's a rhyme or a concept. I would always write it, and then I'd write the first line, and I would go to write the next line as if I knew what it was going to be already. Like, I wouldn't have anything in my mind, but I would just go to put my pen to write. And whatever that thing inside is puts the next word in place. So once I started doing remote viewing, that was very familiar to me when it came to probing, going for data. It was pretty much the same exact phenomenon happening there, where it's like, okay, well, what's the smell here, or what's the concept here? And I go to write it, and right in that moment, the inspiration comes, and I just write it out. So I do think that being a creative played a big part in maybe my success in, being able to handle remote viewing. And
do you think it's the imagination component that you have? You said that the remote viewing basically took you over, right? And that whole experience. To me, that, in my experience, that would be something like I would discover something, and my curiosity would just get insatiable, and I would then go chase that out in this field of imagination I've got, and hope I found my way back at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Genuine curiosity is a big part of my personality, and I think it's one of the main driving factors of what makes someone a good remote viewer or not. There's a difference between wanting to be psychic, or wanting this thing to work, and genuinely kind of pursuing, genuinely following your curiosity. Those are two kind of different things. One is like an idea. One's this idea of like, yeah, I'm going to see this thing in the future, or I'm going to solve this problem. Whereas the other is like existing in that moment and, tapping into whatever that little signal is that comes from the inside. And that requires you to genuinely be curious. I could want to be psychic. I could want to see this thing, but that's not really how it works. There has to be that part of you that's actually trying to find the answer in that moment, and that's not really that's not thinking about the future. That's not thinking about the past. That's not thinking about, oh, how am I going to look, or am I going to get this right? None of those are in your mind at that moment. So, Dick, when I was learning, Dick told me the type of mind state, or the type of intention or focus that you have to have when you're remote viewing. It's like you got to be that old lady who's in a closet, and someone's broken into the house, and she's hiding in the closet, and then there's a bump. Someone's out there, and so in that moment, all your full attention is going in, what's that sound? Where's the person? It's like, that's the kind of mind state you have to be in. It's like, you're not existing anymore. You're becoming that input. Your full attention, your full focus is on that thing. And that's something that's, you can train, you can try and develop it, but I think some people have it, more naturally, and it helps. I think that's what really makes a good remote viewer.
I think I agree with that, and I would say it is going into and with a flow, as in the event stream, right, in the frequency fields. In fact, I have a philosophy that I'm hopefully going to have the book out here soon, called Informatica, and it's the idea that the subtitle is The Metrics in the Matrix, and that everything is information. It doesn't matter what you look at or what you experience, there's something about it that is a measurement, a pattern. We're pattern recognition oriented in the way that we function and learn. And that pattern recognition happens in an infinite field of frequencies, which is where everything comes from. So to me, the stream is constantly on. It's always in motion. and it always seems to be creating more of itself, and seems to have a proclivity for novelty, for adding and creating new, right? So how does it do that? It does it through this infinite field of frequencies that we call energy. And we say, okay, well, everything is energy. Quantum mechanics and all the quantum folks are finally getting into, hey, everything is a wave, right? Everything is in motion. So I think what happens is, as that is constantly moving, there's a frequency stamp of every instance, regardless of how minuscule you want to time it. But because the frequencies and the waves and the cycles within cycles happen, they leave a mark. And that is what we basically call the past. So our memories are these marks in the event stream of the frequency fields that have happened. And we're never in the now, we're always in the next. Because the minute you say now, that's gone and you're in the next. And so to me, and this has been my hypothesis, I'd like your thoughts on this. It seems to me that the concept of non-local consciousness is what remote viewing is basically attenuating to the frequency stamps of a certain frequency. It doesn't have to be in the past, doesn't have to be in the present, doesn't have to be local, physical, ethereal, material, or even future. It's really attenuating to the event stream and looking for that frequency stamp that occurred. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, that's kind of the theory that I learned HRVG methodology is the type of remote viewing that I use, and our whole ethos.
That's the Hawaiian Guild?
Yeah, the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind, our theory of what's happening when we remote view is that there's an information field and our consciousness is kind of like a smaller field within the greater field. And whenever you're connecting to a target, there's a part of your awareness that's resonating, or, however you like to term it, displacing or resonating with that target, with the target site. And it's more like I think it's like tuning into a frequency or, a vibration, and information then moves from that, whatever that vibration is, and we match that, the remote viewer is matching that, and kind of like emulating that information.
So it's kind of like a old time, analog radio where you're dialing into the station, and you can get, depending on, sometimes you got to hold the antenna and become the antenna to get the signal, or put some rabbit ears or aluminum foil on it, but you're attenuating to that frequency, right?
Yeah. I think that's what's happening. Yeah. And
so when you get there, when you're tuned in, all of a sudden you have information flow.
Yeah. And even been doing this for a while, and there's, in video production, there's the idea of frames per second, right? Which is a frequency, right? So the monitor will be refreshing at 60 hertz, 60 times per second. Or the lights in your house are probably refreshing much faster than that, but we perceive it as a constant light source. I think that the remote viewing signal, or the information that we perceive when we remote view, is a frequency that's out of sync with what we perceive every day. So let's say if we're perceiving at 60 hertz, the remote viewing signal may be a little bit more than that, or a little bit less than that. And so it's really when we shift our awareness to tune in to that other frequency, we get flashes of that information. And it literally, to me, it's happened many times to me, it literally is flickering sometimes, it comes in as a flickering image. So I think that the remote viewing signal is just is a different frequency rate than what we're, I guess, when in our waking conscious state, we're not in sync with it, so we don't, readily perceive it, but it's just outside of our perceptual, ability. And doing the remote viewing processes or meditation or, dream states or, ERV, things like that, pushes us just slightly in that direction so that we have what we call, a flash of insight, and we're able to perceive those things for a moment. But I really think it's physically like that, where it's coming in at a slightly different refresh rate than what we're perceiving in our physical reality.
So how different is the protocol and the training that you did on your own in the beginning to what you're using now?
One of the main, I guess some of the main differences are most of the remote viewing manuals and things out there are, for the most part, based on controlled remote viewing, CRV process. And I'm not knocking on it or anything like that. I've studied it and I use it. The main difference with the HRVG methodology that I learned was what I consider is using the highest bandwidth, our input that is the highest bandwidth or highest resolution is our visual field. So like whatever 80+% of what we perceive at any moment is visual information. Like humans are visually oriented creatures. Dogs go around with their nose and we go around with our eyes. That's what we scan the room with. That's what we orient ourselves with. So most remote viewing processes kind of neglect that visual field, and they rely more on receiving impressions and putting them into words, or receiving impressions and trying to sketch them through feeling. Whereas in HRVG methodology, we learn how to close our eyes and train our subconscious to place imagery in a specific place on demand. So, and I believe that the visual field is where the most information at the highest resolution can be communicated in a given moment. So that kind of changed the level, the level of information that I was able to consciously perceive and make sense of went, sometimes 100-fold from what I was doing before. Because one moment of seeing something is 1,000 words, then trying to get 1,000 words, one word at a time or something like that, right? So
well, and the advantage there is that in the visual and the light range, we have much more access to the frequency fields that are available than we do hearing, sonically and audibly. But also on the body, when you get feelings, it's hard to find some words to figure out what the hell that feeling is that's going on. And you got to run it through the mental process and see what kind of images pop up or emoted because of that emotion. So your work in art must have been something that you could also benefit from using that particular aspect of the technique, being more visual in the data you're going after.
Yeah. When I started learning how to see things in remote viewing, that actually made me go back and really study more into my art and how to see better, how to draw better. Like it kind of worked together. You've probably heard this said before, like, like a doctor does remote viewing. He's probably going to be good at doctor type information. He might get some medical stuff, and that's the stuff he'll pick up on. I think it's a similar thing. I mean, if you're a visual person, you're probably going to get some visual, you're probably going to be more attracted to or more easily process the visual information that's available in the signal. So, I mean, really, when I saw Dick Allgaier do certain sessions. And, I'd been doing remote viewing for many years up until that point. Like before I ever saw him work a session, I had been doing remote viewing and I was pretty good at it. I was decent. But when I saw him, some of the stuff he drew, honestly, I couldn't believe it. I just said, how is that possible? I just didn't think that was possible. So learning it, learning how that works and now being able to do that myself, it's just, I really think that we're playing ourselves short. We need to put more focus. We need to put more time and effort into developing our visual side if we really want to go somewhere with remote viewing. I think we're leaving out a very big chunk of, what's useful in remote viewing. And I did a talk for IRVA on this, last year about thinking in images and visual processing and the nonverbal, right-brained processes of consciousness. And I think that is one of the things that we're missing. And it's the thing that changed my remote viewing, 180 degrees. And it made it more interesting for me. It was getting to the point where I felt like I'm hitting a plateau. I'm hitting this barrier where it's like, why can't I get more information? Why can't I get a better idea of what the target is? Why does it feel like I'm separated from it? And I think it had a lot to do with that resolution, that bandwidth. You know what I mean? It was like us trying to have this conversation over text messages instead of just getting on a video call and doing it.
I just got a real painful groan in my gut just thinking of that. That visual gave me pain. So it sounds to me, and this is one of my pet peeves of society in general. When I am a guest on other shows, I give them my little thing about who I am. And I was on Jimmy Church last October, and I gave him my standard little thing, which is I'm an autodidact semiotician with an insatiable curiosity and an overly fertilized field of imagination. And the first thing that stops everybody is autodidact. So what the hell's that? I've kind of heard that. And then semiotician, what's going on there? It's just using 25-cent words to make a sentence. Autodidact is self-taught, right? Which is what I think we all are, actually. Even those with the stamped pieces of paper hanging on the frame on the wall, they may have gone somewhere to get the information, but they taught themselves. And I think that that's really how we function, and we need to kind of change reframe the way that we think about learning and the fact that that's what we do. Now, semiotician is somebody who studies the symbology and nature of languages and symbols and words, right? Well, in my Informatica model, one of the key tenets that I think is really important for people to understand is that language is the operating system of the mind. The words, the symbols, the letters, the sounds, all of that constitute the language that you use to explore and explain the reality you inhabit and engage with is going to frame it for you. And one of the examples I use is the word student. And the word student in English is typically referred to someone who is engaged in the study of something with the path to completion. There will be some kind of, yes, you get a diploma, stamp, certificate, whatever. And then you move on to something else. In kanji, in Japanese, the word for student is ka, K-A. And their meaning of that is that once you are a student, you were always a student of it. You never stop being a student. It is a perpetual, continuous thing. That change right there, just understanding the word student from that perspective, would completely change Western society. People would stop. I think they would get an upgrade on the whole learning model and the concept of schooling versus education, and all of these things they're broken systems now. We are in the process, I think, of going through, people have called it the Great Reset. To me, I looked at it and I said, well, the first thing is happening, there's a great awakening. And that awakening has got eyeballs on shit that people didn't know was out there to have eyeballs on. And that's causing a great reveal. And it's like, well, shit, I didn't know that stuff was out there, and I didn't know these patterns and these nuggets were all connected in some way, shape, or form, and I don't like the way they look, actually. And that great reveal, after seeing all these patterns and so forth, is leading to a great rethink. So people are stopping and going, oh, wait a minute, I need to rethink this shit, because the way it has been hasn't clearly worked out very well at all. And that is leading to what I think is the great reimagining. People are going to be able to have a free, open-minded, observational, neutral look at reality and try to reframe and reorganize how reality actually is. And it's going to come down to consciousness, which is what you and I started wanting to have a conversation about, or I certainly wanted to have a conversation with you about, because consciousness is, I think, an ontological model of reality, is to me what explains everything that we experience. It explains the reality, the way it works, its nature, its habits, its functions, its characteristics. The concept of law is a man-made construct. I don't think the universe or consciousness has laws. It has it and its nature and its habit and its characteristics and the way that it unfolds itself. And I think the non-local experience and expression of consciousness, which is what you have developed an incredible mastery of that craft, I think that's where the real liberation of reality is going to come for the future. I think more and more people, when people see that, just like you shared, you weren't looking for remote viewing, you were drawing and you were making sounds and music and you were being a happy hermit. I know, because I would do the same thing and have done for a long time. If I'm just sitting here in my little creative studio and I've got nobody bothering me, I can determine what feed of nonsense I'm letting in, and I can instead focus on, I want some great music and I want to get out my guitars and I want to just fill this space with the sonic satiation of me going, yes, I would definitely rather do that. And it makes a difference in the way that you eventually attune yourself. The long way of going around the point I wanted to make, which is the interdisciplinary components of all of the things that we experience and that we have, is, I think, what you are embodying. You've brought your art, your music, your mind, your curiosity, and you were working with all of that stuff collectively and independently, and then this thing called remote viewing stopped by and said, hey, want to go for a ride?
Yeah, it does require, a range of different skill sets to be good at remote viewing. It's, and that kind of ties back into what I was saying before. It's like, it's an interesting idea that you could be psychic. It's a compelling, desirable thing. A lot of people would like that. They like that idea that, I could tell you what's here, or I could see the future, or I could see across time and space. Everyone wants to be able to say that. Everyone would love if that was, if that was true. And I do think it is true in a sense, but for it to actually happen successfully, that's a different story. You know what I mean? That's going to require a certain amount of practice and dedication. And I think that's the part that people don't see, that part of it yet. They don't understand that, it takes a long time to really develop the skills and to make it second nature. It's like playing a sport. Even the greatest, baseball player can't hit a home run on demand sometimes, right? It's like, there's so many factors. How is the pitch coming in? How's the wind? How's the crowd is affecting you? There's so many different things that come into play. remote viewing is similar in that sense, that there is a certain amount of you got to be humble to a certain sense.
You got to kind of suspend anything that we would classify as ego.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not about, if your mentality is, I'm the best and I'm going to hit this target every single time, it's like, you're probably not going to have as good success as you think you would. It's more of like a Zen approach where it's like, you might work for 2 hours on a target and then you might just have to dust it off and say, that was wrong. And you can't be like, oh, that was wrong. Damn. And why didn't I get it right? And it's like, it's not really from that approach. It's for me, it's more like, that was wrong. Okay. Now for the next one. It's like, yeah, it's from a different place. You got to approach it from a different kind of mentality. I'm never really thinking about being right when I'm doing remote viewing. And that's kind of what the methods are there to help you with. So if you're constantly thinking about being right while you're doing a remote viewing session, you're not gonna be able to interpret the information, right? You got to be kind of like a still pond. If you're thinking and worrying, that's gonna create waves, right? So, a certain amount of time and discipline and repetition has to go into it before it really starts to pay off. And I think a lot of people stop too early. You know what I mean? They learn about remote viewing, they dabble in it, maybe they have a couple cool experiences, but then the hard part comes where it's like you got to fail a whole bunch of times. You got to get it wrong, a couple 100,000 times. And
yeah, it's like that axiom. It's like that axiom: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, yeah. And the whole mentality that, and I learned this from Dick. It's like, I've done a lot of great remote viewing work, and, I've got, I'm pretty accurate. I can, get on a target and I could tell you a lot about it. But the whole saying that I go by and that he taught me is, you're only as good as your last session. That's how I think of it. So it's like, I'm not even, I'm not going to come out and brag about all these things that happened. I'm just saying, for me, it's like, I'm only as good as my last session. And in that mind state, anyone could be a great remote viewer. Someone who just started yesterday could do a session today better than me. It can happen. Obviously maybe not, but maybe it can, right? So that's kind of the way I approach it. It's like discipline, developing the skill, and you got to have a bit of a neutral approach to it. You can't be easily dissuaded, and you can't be easily inflated, where it blows up your ego and you think you're the greatest in the world. So it's walking a kind of thin, walking a thin line to be good at it, really.
Well, have you seen Third Eye Spies, Russell Targ's remote viewing, about Stargate?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff in there, one of the most fascinating stories from that time was Pat Price, who was a sheriff or a policeman or chief or something, and he had zero training, zero exposure to the fact that there was even training or some kind of method or protocol that could be used. This guy just shows up, just starts flipping through, yep, that person over there, here you go.
Yeah.
To me let me ask you, what do you think that kind of psychic, and maybe psychic is even the wrong word, which is we could have another discussion about, but those kinds of abilities, do you think that's just something that person just is naturally attenuated to the field to be able to go see instantly? What is that, do you think?
It's hard to say in some cases, but I think it's usually tied to different life experiences. Him being a police commissioner, maybe it's that need for knowing or being in that heat of the moment, having to solve something, an informational need that that needs to be had. Maybe that's puts him in a certain mind state. Yeah, I think some people are just from what's happened in their life. Some say it's related to different traumas or different experiences that may have dissolved, the typical kind of ego or mask that we have on a day to day. Yeah, some people are just, very gifted in that sense. And I would never consider myself to be that. I was never, I had some precognitive dreams and stuff like that. But what I do when I remote view is definitely something that I developed through the practice. And now I can do it more casually, but it definitely was something that was developed over time. But there's definitely people out there that are like Pat Price, and they don't know a lick about taking a class or having to learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even know that there's a name for it.
Yeah.
They just kind of do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your experience with remote viewing, particularly, the big one that you hit last year was the assassination. I mean, that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, that I remember. You talked earlier about how you're attenuating to a visual, and sometimes it's like a flash and like a flicker, right, of a scene or a set of information. Describe what you experienced when you saw that event, when you were in that session. What was that like?
Yeah, for Future Forecasting Group, we, at the end of every month, we do what we call world events session, and this is where we try to perceive the major upcoming news events over the horizon. So this is a bit of a slightly different approach from a typical remote viewing session, in that I am consciously going into this trying to see the future. It's not like a set target, it's not in a feedback folder. It's something that's going to occur. It's something that we're hoping is going to occur. So I was working this session, and we start off.
What month was this? April, I think, or March?
Yeah, I think this was in April. I think we published this in April. Yeah. And we were looking forward for the quarter, the quarter of the year, the next quarter. So we were looking for the next few months. What's going to be the next big events that are going to occur. So we start off collecting, low-level sensory information at the beginning of the session, and this is in like a beta mind state, a awake and alert type state. And I just, I close my eyes and I look and I see a person in front of a crowd, just for like a second and a half, I see a person in front of a crowd. And from there, I start to probe for associated sensory data. Like, okay, I saw this scene. What's the sounds there? And I hear people talking. Okay, what's the smell? What's the taste? What's the temperature? Things like that. So that builds up kind of like a low resolution scene. So I have I'm putting all this information together, but it's not anything I'm going to jump to a conclusion on yet. It's a very much kind of like a skeletal framework of what is happening at this target. So
now, are you writing the information as you're seeing it?
Yeah. So I'm sketching these things. I'm, filling in little cells, little boxes where we record the information, and then we assemble it on a single page. So there's a whole bunch of, kind of like casting a wide net. We collect a whole bunch of little lines of data, and then we try and put it together on a single page intuitively. So it's like, okay, where does this thing go? Where does this sound go? Where is this person standing? And we try and put it together. And so I had a person in front of a crowd, large crowd of people. And really that's all I had at that point in the session. So we take that and we move into what we call S4. And this is where we try and isolate each part. So if there was a person there, we're going to try and look at that person in detail and try and find out more about that person. We want to look at the, you know, the area that they're in. We want to look at the people in the crowd and see what's happening with them. And this happens in more of a alpha state. So this is like bordering on like the daydream type, you know, mind state whenever we go to do this. So prior to this part in the session, I'll be seeing things for maybe a second, like a quick flash. Whereas once I move to this part of the session, sometimes I could see something for 4 to 12 seconds, you know, depending on how strong the signal is. So going into this one, you know, I knew there was this person in front of a crowd, and I'm saying, okay, I want to see what happens here. And I close my eyes and I look on a place that we call Blackboard. This is that area that we train ourselves for the subconscious to place the imagery. And I saw a man doing a speech in front of a crowd. And as I'm going to, you know, draw this, I'm starting to draw it. As I'm drawing it, more little things kind of pop in as I'm trying to record it, probing for different information. Like, okay, what is it? What is he talking about? Okay, it's political. He's charismatic. He's animated. People are, engaged in this guy. He's the center of attention. And then I saw, just like a quick flash, I see a person with a rifle, up and to the left. Like it's hard to explain. You kind of just know things, you know. I just knew that this guy was up and to the left, so I just draw this guy somewhere, you know, elevated and off to the left. There's this sharpshooter. There's someone with a rifle. So I sketch all that, and I'm just getting the sense that this is like an assassination type event. And as you can imagine, at that time, you record some data like that, it's like, well, your conscious mind is going to start to come in and start to think it knows what it is, right? It's going to want to name it and say, oh, this is this person or this is that person. So at that point, I kind of had to leave it there. I said, okay, if I try and get anything more on this, it's very likely that I'm going to add some stuff in that's maybe not there, right? So that was that part of it. And I had another visual in another session for that same target. I saw, looking down the scope of a rifle, I saw someone taking aim, and I got very similar data. So this was the second time for that month that I was seeing someone in some kind of assassination type event, you know, going to occur.
So did your monkey mind immediately go to this is Trump?
Yeah. That was we try not to say that, you know what I mean? I don't want to go out and say that, but
you don't want to project it on it because you might pollute the data, right?
Exactly. And yeah, you don't want to destroy the stream of information, but that was very much not only in my mind, but I'm sure everyone who was watching, they're probably thinking the same thing, right? So we published that, we put it out, and kind of just went on to the next thing. I mean, that's all we just got to put it out there and then go on with the work. And I think it was June. I can't remember if it was June or July that, when it actually ended up happening.
It was July 13th, and it was significant for me because my birthday's on the 15th, and that was Monday. And then, Cliff High, of course, and he had his predictive linguistics that there was some kind of energetic event that was going to happen around the middle of July. And I'm going, shit, man, not on my birthday. Come on. And then when I heard that Saturday night that the attempt had happened, I was like, okay, this is the event that apparently Cliff was seeing in his linguistic predictions. But how did you connect instantly when you found out about it? What happened?
I was at I was at a restaurant near here where I live, and I was having a drink, and the bartender was talking to someone else, and they said, "Oh, someone shot Trump at a rally," right? And I wasn't really thinking about the remote viewing data at that moment. I was just, it just didn't really sink in at that time. She's like, "Oh, someone got shot. Trump got shot." So I said, "Okay, let me look at the news," and I pulled up BBC, and it said Trump falls at rally or something. It didn't say anything about him getting shot at the time. It just said like he fell down or walked off the stage or something like that. So I kind of just said, okay, whatever. This is just this this is something silly. And then maybe half an hour went by, and I went back and started seeing on Twitter and different news media started showing the actual videos and of what actually happened, and that's when I was like, okay. This is it. Yeah, this is exactly what I saw. This is exactly what I drew. And that was, kind of a surreal moment. I can't really recall. I mean, I wasn't around when JFK assassination happened, but there hasn't really been that kind of event, on such a public event, assassination attempt on a president hasn't happened in a long time. Not that I know of.
Well, Reagan would have been the last one when Hinckley or whatever his name tried to take him out. So that was one of the things that I noticed when I looked at it. I said, okay, I've been a conspiracy analyst for 30 or more years, because every time I looked at reality and I listened to the narrative, I said, something's not right here. Narrative's not fitting with the reality that I'm experiencing. So I've said for a long time that everything, at least from JFK, and if you want to go back on the whole alien, UFO, UAP, EIEIO stuff that's going on, I call it the ufology community now. But you can go back to Cape Girardeau and even into Italy and all kinds of stuff. But I think what we're seeing is all of these things up until the smartphone, not the cell phone. Do you remember when the Nokia, the flip phones came out, and it was like, holy shit, I could walk around with, a Uniblab in my pocket. And then 5 years later, you've got a, quantum computer in your pocket. You're the ultimate Uniblab. The access to information that people now have to go and look for things themselves is going back to what I was saying about the difference between schooling and education. And we're really going to see a transformation of the learning paradigm because of the access to knowledge and because of refocusing on, you start with consciousness and everything flows from there. So if you start there, then your chances of finding out what's really going on and having a more successful navigation in it are going to go up big time. But at that event, one of the things I said, okay, there's never before has there been a public event with this many recording devices at it. The amount of information that was absorbed instantly at that time is going to cause any kind of cover-up to be next to impossible. And that, to me, was a significant event in the event stream of people realizing, oh shit, people have got information devices all over the planet now, and they're now all interconnected. The whole drone thing that happened recently with people going, all right, well, what's this? It's like, well, I don't know, looks like it's got FAA regulation it's hitting, because it's got the green and the red lights and it's kind of doing its thing. And I'm not sure why I was wandering off on that, but I want to come back to this event. So what was the feeling that you had? That you said it was surreal. Did you have a full body, full conscious flow of like, oh shit, I was dialed in when that happened?
Yeah. I mean, it's happened before. I mean, it's happened many times, but not really that many of them were an event this big. I definitely kind of went back in my mind to when we recorded that debrief, and sometimes it's like, oh man, I wish I said more, or I wish I did more on that, but it's a bizarre kind of feedback loop that happens. It's like you draw this thing, you describe this event, you put it out there for the public, could be completely wrong. I'm just doing what I do. I'm just putting it out there, and then there it is. It happens like clear as day. And some of the details that were in my drawing, like I had the screen behind him, I had the projectile streaking behind, and his arm was up, pretty much like what all the major photos were of him. I had it drawn in my drawing there. And it's just like the amount of information that comes in those flashes, it's more than the conscious mind can process. It's more than the remote viewer realizes. So all I can do in that moment is let my draw, let my hand go where it wants to go, and sketch out whatever's inside of me at that moment, probe for some follow-up information, and try and keep it as clean as possible, right? Before you ruin it, it's a small window of opportunity is how I see it. There's a window of time where it's like, you have access to this target now. Once you get to a certain point, once you've collected a certain amount of information, there's a much higher chance that you're going to pollute it with your own opinions and stuff like that. But it's, it fascinates me every time. I'm a bit numb to it because I do it all the time, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, there it is. It happened again.
It's got to be a fascinating experience to have have enough of experience with it where the profundity of it, how just absolutely dead on it can be, and yet you can't go into it looking for that. You just have to go into it to see what happens, and you've got to do it and let it go and move on to the next, and let the data, prove itself over time.
There was one of the criticisms I got on that data. Some people were saying it could have been anyone, or it could have been any event, or whatever it was. So there was yeah, okay. So there was a couple months later, what was it? I think August we were doing world events again, and I see a guy with a gun, and I'm probing into it, and I get, is this another assassin type event, right? And I'm saying, okay, this time I'm going to look at the person's face. And that's what I told myself. I'm going to draw this person's face. I'm going to look at their face so that there's no questioning it, who it's going to be. If this really happens, I would have drawn him. So I look, I close my eyes, I look, I see this person, and I draw them. So I draw this guy, and I say, there's going to be a high-profile assassination attempt. He's going to flee, and there's going to be like a manhunt. Like police are going to shut down the area and try and find this guy. That's what I described in my work. And then it was the next month was the Ryan Ruth assassination attempt. And my drawing, people can go look at it and make up their own mind, but I saw that guy and I drew him before it happened. I drew his face. So people want to try and, calculate the probabilities of what that is. I'd love to hear about
the only people that get wound up about stuff like that and don't see it for what it is, they have a whole bunch of other issues that are unresolved. It's like, if you got to get wound up and go cherry pick stuff that is clearly, you're making up so that you can feel justified, then you have an ego problem.
Yeah.
You got some narcissist shit going down. So that is empirical data. And that's one of the things that so many of our sciences, hell, even the other divination tools, need more of is empirical, demonstrable, credible data. And I got to tell you, as a one who wanders in the woo and looks for all of the stuff that's going on out there, seeing the kind of results that you're doing and your team with Ed, Dick, and Daz, and Sean's been knocking it out as well. It's been fun watching him come along. But you guys, the track record of being able to use that non-local consciousness to go see what was, what is, and what may be, is I think it's a gift to the upgrade of humanity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get the attention and the respect that I think that it deserves. I mean, if those skills are things that, like you said, you didn't go looking for remote viewing. You kind of fell face first into it, you know? Yeah. And the next thing you know, you're covered in it and you're loving it. Those skills, the psychic abilities are that you're using a protocol and a methodology. You're basically using a tool set to go decode the metrics in the matrix.
Yeah. Yeah. I think society, for the most part, is, there's some fear behind those ideas. Trying
all manufactured.
For them to accept that it's too hard for a lot of society to accept that could be possible. It's so much easier to say, oh, well, why haven't they won the lottery yet? Or why haven't, it's so much easier to brush it away with these stupid kind of, comments than it is to actually sit there and look at the information and study it over time and say, okay, maybe I thought it was a coincidence, but now that I've seen it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from all these different people, maybe I should take it a little more seriously now. It's just easier to put it off onto something else, whether it's technology. It's okay for technology to do amazing things. We're fine with that. But when it's human beings doing it, it's like, no, we gotta, we can't accept that. I don't know what it is. It's, maybe it's the responsibility or the implications of what that means. Some people, I guess, I've experienced this in my personal life. Some people find out what I do and they're scared, they're scared I'm going to see something about them or I'm going to know something about them that they don't want me to know. So it's like, there's a lot of different threads that come from this. And for whatever reason, it's a hard pill for humanity to swallow. But I'm with you in the fact that this is a tool that I think we were using stuff like this in the past. How else would have cultures in the past have made it as far as they made it? They must have had foresight. They must have known things that they didn't learn in the conventional sense. They had insights, they had intuition. And for the most part, our modern day society, we still have it, but it's barely functioning to the level that it would have been in the past. And when it does happen, we cover it up and say it's something else. You know what I mean? We make up excuses for it. Yeah.
Get thee behind me, and you know,
yeah,
all that crazy shit.